I need to learn a ton of crap here. And we don't fall into that trap where we think we know it all. We think we have all of the answers.
And I love that phrase, vision in motion, because most people don't put those two terms together.
Both you and I have lived this process of entrepreneurship, and I decided to launch my company and quit my 27-year career as an executive.
And it's funny, I have a vision of myself with a six pack. And I'm a little disappointed because my vision was higher than reality. But my progression towards that is what keeps me motivated.
Welcome to Grow Division Podcast, your hub for leadership insights and entrepreneurial strategies. Join hosts Eric Hernandez and Terryl Curry as they share their tactics, stories, and step-by-step guidance to help expand your influence and grow your business.
Welcome, everybody, to our second episode of Grow to Vision Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Terry Curry. My name is Eric Hernandez, and we're ready to kick it in gear here with our second topic that we want to talk on this series of setting your vision. Today, we're going to talk about vision in motion, and we have a great set of topics to dive into. This is going to be one of those that if you didn't watch the first episode, which I recommend you do, that sets the stage for this second one. We're now going to dive into taking action, being able to develop habits, setting up a much clear routine for how to execute your vision and achieve your vision. So without further ado, I'm here with my co-host Terry Curry. Terry, why don't we get started and jump right in?
All right, let's do it.
So Terry, when we talk about vision in motion, let's kind of start setting the stage here. What do we want? How do we want to start here with this conversation? I think there's one thing that calls at me is vision in motion. Motion is action, right? It's something that has a drive behind it. So can you start us off here with just what do you see as vision in motion? How do you define that?
Well, that's awesome, love. And I love that phrase, vision in motion, because most people don't put those two terms together. Normally, when you think of vision, you think of something that's kind of, a picture of what good looks like or what great looks like. But when you put it in motion, that's you progressing towards it. And whether you're in your professional environment or personal environment, it's the exact same thing. I mean, we all have visions, even personally, but if you don't take action, how do you really get there? I mean, look, so I go to church, a lot, and I know a lot of times the pastor will say, give you these things you should do and these things that you can be doing. But the thing is, when you leave, are you doing them? And it's the exact same thing, even in your business. When we paint this vision and people have their core principles that they have on their website, and we will go into a facility and ask someone about it, and they haven't taken the time to really relate to it. They can't tell you how they're progressing towards it. So the vision in motion is exactly what you said. It's actually taking some actions, doing some things, building those habits that's going to take you to where you want to go.
It's extremely important for us to really map out, right, what are going to be from that long-term view. Visions could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but what do you start doing now that will help you achieve that vision? And to your point, what are those actions and disciplines you need to implement? The other day we were talking about this, and one of the first thoughts I had in mind was when you start helping an individual or leader in a business, one of the first things we start talking about is how do you start mapping out your goals, and those goals to be actionable. And I know there's many methods out there to do this, but for us, one of the biggest I would say avenues we take with this concept is we start really getting down to the nitty gritty, right? We get down to those actions that are aligned to that vision and those goals that you set aside. And for for me, I think it's important that as an individual, you start there, right? What are those habits that you're going to start putting in place that will allow you to then see through a compound effect of those actions over time that will help you achieve that vision. So for me personally, Terry, I'd say one of the biggest aspects or biggest, I'd say, approaches that I would take is I start with what is the one goal that I have, that or that one part of my vision that I can kind of segment out into one goal. And then from there, I start driving it down to what are those yearly goals from that one part of the vision, and then keep ratcheting it down to the quarterly, to the monthly, and eventually down to the action that I'm going to take every day to then start driving that forward. So, why don't we drive into one of those examples that you and I talked the other day, that could possibly give us that picture for someone that's listening to this podcast, to give them a picture of how do you do that? How do you go from a possibly a vision that seems unattainable right now down to something that seems a little bit more concrete as you get it down to the year, and then eventually down to your daily habits and actions that you take. So why don't we start with one example of something that you've done either for yourself or for someone else?
I love the visualization that you gave us, and I'll tell you something personally that I'm working on, and then professionally also, right? So when you talk about vision, and in the last podcast, we talked about vision boards, and we talked at a high level about setting goals for yourself, and I mentioned how I have my vision board in my cabinet. I like to look at it every day. Well, there's a reason for that, because there's a different when you talk about vision and motion. There's perfection and there's progression. And there's a difference between progression and perfection. So perfection, I'll give you a simple example. So, Eric, I'm not quite as fit as you. I don't have all the habits that you have for staying in shape, because I know you work out, you box, you do all different types of things. But I have been going to the gym. And it's funny, I have a vision of myself with a six pack. Listen, when I look in the mirror, I know a six pack's there, it's just covered with fat right now, but it's there, right? I need to bring it out. That's my vision, is I've got this guy with this nice six pack. So I'll go to the gym and I'll work out. And you know how if you work out, you come back and you feel a little sore and you can't open your arms all the way. And I get home and I take my shirt off and I look in the mirror. I'm like, oh, I'm a little disappointed, because my vision was higher than reality. But my progression towards that is what keeps me motivated. When I first start to see, hey, my pant size went down a couple of inches, or hey, I see a line here right now that wasn't there before, and look, I can make this pec jump that I couldn't make before. Now I'm seeing progression towards that. Well, is it not the same thing even in the professional environment? We have a vision of what greatness looks like, right? But when you start to unpack that a little bit and you look at, okay, well, what are we doing to maintain our momentum? And what I call it is, when we go into facilities and we see what I call normalized dysfunction. And it's when you have dysfunction that's become a habit that has been normalized, because if it's not talked about or corrected, then you're pretty much just encouraging it. So when we go into facilities, and I know when we're doing our assessments of places, we're looking for some of this normalized dysfunction. And that's when you come up with a plan to help people progress from where they are today to that vision that they've outlined for themselves. So first thing you do is to understand where you are, and understand not only what does perfection look like, but what are the habits of that perfect state. And I know you and I talked about this also before, where we talk about, you're an average of the 5 people you spend the most time around, right? So if we want to get to the next level, you need to be around some of those people that are at that level already. And I was always told that, listen, if you want to be an eagle, you need to develop the habits of an eagle. So what are those habits? If you don't know what those are, and you're just operating in that normalized dysfunction, then how can you progress?
One thing you mentioned, and I wanna go back, because I think we're today in a culture of everybody's highly sensitive about. You mentioned putting a picture, right, and having a picture of what a six pack look like. I want to go back to that a little bit. I laughed about it because
Well, you have one, I don't yet.
I think people tend to be very sensitive about having something to strive for, and if you put a picture of someone that has the body you seek, some people may take that the wrong way. Some people may think that that's putting a lot of pressure on you, and I tend to view it like you. I think this is something that you want to use to continue to build motivation. Motivation doesn't come from anyone else but yourself. So you got to start using these tactics to help you drive that motivation that's going to help you then establish those habits. And to your point, you mentioned two things that I believe are very important. You not only have that as your, let's say, end state, or at least a state, not necessarily an end state, let's say, for that vision, right? So let's say that's your vision for the next 2 to 3 years to achieve that body physique. And then you start putting the plan together, and then you start having those habits and actions that you're taking on a daily basis. You're showing progress. But you said something very important that I think sometimes it gets missed, is you're tracking those habits. And that's where you start building not only a way for you to have a feedback mechanism, but you're also putting a system in place of accountability. Because by having those that tracking, and tracking your goals on a weekly basis, tracking your goals on a daily basis, and being able to know, hey, today I achieved this. And over time, I mentioned the phrase compound effect. You're going to have a compound effect of those actions as long as you're staying true to what you are supposed to do on a daily basis. And that's a very important aspect of the how to put your vision in motion. The other thing, and I'm curious on how you feel about this, is when you start putting together this plan, and how you went from, using that same example, right? Your ideal body physique that you want to achieve. And then you said, okay, now from there, I'm going to put this plan together. And you mentioned going to the gym, but before you got to that, how did you say, okay, what is my plan for this year, to at least know that I'm heading towards that goal of a better body physique over the course of time?
All right, Eric. So I'm gonna jump into a subject that we haven't talked about recently, but I know you're passionate about. And if you recall, it started when we talked about, taking what we've done in the professional world and using it in our personal life. When we start the year and we go through our goal setting and we break it down by quarter, and we have different categories. We have spiritual goals, we have professional goals, we have personal, physical goals, family goals, all these different goals. And, we truly believe what gets measured gets managed. So we understand, okay, well, how do you know you're getting better? How are you progressing? And the first thing we started to do was, when we came with our goals, one, you need an accountability partner. At the time, you were mine. And we started doing what we call journaling. You introduced me to this bullet journal, and I had never seen it before, but it really revolutionized how I track what my progression personally. And I started writing. I had in that journal, I had one page that was a daily habit tracker. And I was tracking how many glasses of water I had a day. If I had a goal for getting 10,000 steps, I had to track it. But one key thing that you pointed out to me that resonated was, listen, it's okay to not make it, but write it down. If you don't make that goal today, you write it down. And at the end of the month, I will calculate how many percentage of the days I met the goals for each of those categories. And when I showed this journal to people, numbers say, oh man. And I know we were in training before where we brought this concept and we showed people our journal. Like, guys, you guys are serious? You actually do this? Well, yes. But listen, I know I'm getting better because I'm progressing. I know I'm getting better because I'm measuring on the way and I'm intentional with my actions. The reason that I bring this concept up, even when I do training, because I tell people the same thing. In your day-to-day functions, what are you tracking daily that's progressing you towards that perfection that you've built in your vision? And I had a boss a while back when I was in automotive, and I won't say his name, but if he watches this, he'll know I'm talking about him. Because when he first came on board, we were complacent. We were operating in that zone of normalized dysfunction where we didn't know we were dysfunctional. We were just, it was habit, it was good. No one complained, so we were good. Well, he came in and he had a relentless pursuit of perfection through our daily habits, to the point where I was in maintenance at the time. I was a maintenance manager, and I was, we worked a lot of weekends getting things done. He came in every weekend. I said, man, this guy's such a micromanager. And he was like, no, he says, look, he would call me up to his office and he would have printed out every shift letter from every supervisor for the entire week. And he would have highlighted anything he thought was an open item. And he would drill me on each one, regardless how big or how small. But his point was, he was building a habit of following up on communication and not letting things drop off the table. And he would literally say, okay, Terry, how about this one? Okay, I mean, that's a fan that needs to be moved. Okay, when is it scheduled to be moved? And he would literally go through every one of those until it became my habit. When it became my habit and I started doing it with my people, guess what? He stopped showing up every weekend. But I was showing up every weekend. He actually made me, well, he didn't make me do it. I just felt a need to do the exact same thing. But what that built was we were building a culture. We were building a culture where the people that were writing these notes down knew that, hey, someone's always going to follow up on my items. What I say is important and it matters. That's why when we go into a facility and we talk about voice of the employee and we try to get that feedback, we are always trying to understand from their perspective. You remember, we always talk about maturity of an organization being how they deal with people, problems, pressure, and perspective. If we're getting that perspective from those individuals and making them a part of our transformation, making them a part of our progression, now we have a culture that's progressing towards perfection, and that's what's sustainable.
I love the story, and you told it to me a few times already, about that boss, your old manager from General Motors, from Ford, sorry,
Yeah.
when you were there. And and at times I feel that, in a business environment, right, when you're trying to implement a vision, um, many individuals feel that, oh, it's a lot of work to track all these little details, or it's a lot of work to do this manually, or why would I want to track this on a notepad or a board when I can just track it on my computer, and have a software or system do it for me. And there's so much power in my opinion, there's so much power in you tracking your goals, writing them down, and seeing that progress, and being able to compare week to week, day to day, week to week, month to month. What is your progress? It just triggers something in your brain, and it just continues to fuel that motivation. And I feel that at times people really push back on those simple the simple idea of just using a journal, using something that you could write it down and track it and see it and be able to go back to it and flip a couple pages. It's okay to use a notepad or journal, or a board, even in some other work environments, like what we had, when we worked at the plants, in manufacturing. And I think that there's a lot of pushback in today's age, because people want to digitize everything, and it's great. I mean, I think there's a function to both. And I feel that the manual aspect of tracking your daily habits that are aligned to your goals will generate just a continued um, uh, energy generation towards that goal. And I feel that that's something that needs to be said more and more. And I always I get frustrated when we're sometimes dealing with some of the professionals we worked with in the past that push back on that at first glance. But to your point, you just kind of sometimes you have to work underneath the radar and start implementing those, and then eventually they'll see the benefits. And when they see the benefits, they ask you, what did you do to make that change in that area, that group, or that department? And then all of a sudden you turn around and you say, well, I've been tracking the goals, here's how we've been doing it. And I got, to your point, like you did with your team, I have my team doing the same thing, and everyone is going towards the same direction. The impact that you create doing that type of action of tracking things manually, it just time and time again has proven, to at least to me, and I think to both of us in our experiences, how it really works, and it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Eric, how many times have we gone into a facility or worked with a company and they have this great vision and they've put some things in place and they've kind of checked the box, yep, we put this poster up and we put this board up and we're tracking this and this, but they haven't taken the time to get buy-in. And what I mean buy-in is you have to make sure that you're listening to those people, because I always tell people, listen, there's no better professional of how this process works than the person that's actually going through the process and doing it on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's important that, when we talk about progression, I always look at culture because we use culture as kind of that temperature gauge on how we're going to move and sustain, right? And I have one of my mentors, Steve. Steve. He always says this. He says, "Listen, you always have to create a nameless, shameless, and blameless environment, and a culture where people feel comfortable pushing back. Sometimes, the leader's ideas, maybe they have flaws, maybe they have problems with them, but you and I work the same, right? When we're getting ready to, let's say we're going to build a workshop for the first time, we do the same thing all the time. We don't start off with perfection. We throw things on the board and we see what sticks, right? We take some things down, we add some things, we modify some things. Those are the same when you're making improvements in your organization or you making improvements for yourself. You have to start. It won't be perfect, but as my pastor, my church always says, listen, we don't lose, we learn. So what are you doing with those learnings? One thing that I've seen to create a professional, a progression based environment, there's four key needs. And this is in the professional world or your personal world. And we can relate it to both and maybe give examples of those. But there's four things you need. One, you need education, because you need to know what you don't know. So you have to educate yourself. That's why we're always continuously learning, and we encourage people to continuously learn. You also need innovation. You mentioned, okay, maybe people don't necessarily write things down all the time, especially when I look at, my children and your children the same. They'll pick up their phone and do everything from the phone. I mean, they won't even use a laptop. They'll do it all from their phone. So you need innovation and incorporate that, because technology is always making you more efficient at how you do things. And the third thing you need is insulation. You need protection. You need to ensure an operational resilience in your environment. So you need to foster a secure environment for growth. And what do I mean by that? That means you're creating formal processes. I don't have one individual with all the knowledge. I'm not relying on just tribal knowledge. I'm also, have formal processes in place so others can succeed and not have to go through the learning lessons that we've gone through before, because we've actually documented some of those things that have formal processes in place. And then the fourth thing that you need is elevation. And what I mean by elevation, you think about it. When you go to a 50-story building, would you rather go up the stairs or take the elevator? I mean, the elevator gets you there quicker, right?
For
I always
sure.
tell people, they say, Terry, what makes you so excited about being a consultant? And I said, well, listen, consultants, one thing we do is we only deal with problems. Our learning curve is exponential. When I was in Ford and I was with other companies, my learning path was linear. I dealt with problems as they came up, right? But when you only deal with problems, you kind of learn faster. And I had a mentor that always told me, listen, you don't have to be the expert. You just have to know the expert. So the best way to get through something is to be with someone that's been through it before, right? So that's why you have to foster an environment where you're pulling in expertise as needed to elevate the group faster. And sometimes you get over those hurdles quicker by having someone that's been through it, that's going through it with you.
Those 4 points are very practical. Let's start with number one, right? You mentioned education. And I think both you and I have lived this process of entrepreneurship. And for me personally, when I decided to launch my company and quit my 27-year career in the last few years as an executive for a company. One of the first aha moments for me was, I need to learn a ton of crap here. And there was a lot of education that not only how to run my business, but just the simple things of how I'm going to keep track of my accounting, how I'm going to keep track of well, how I deal with the customers and the clients that I'm working with. How do I manage legal matters? And I quickly realized that you cannot do it all yourself. That's an important aspect. But I also realized that I need to learn a lot, not necessarily to be an expert in all of them, but just to know enough so that, to your point, you don't have to be the expert, but you need to know the expert. But you also need to know what to ask those experts, right? Because it's not just let me just find somebody to do it for you and you just kind of leave it out of sight, out of mind. You really have to learn how to guide those experts on what you're looking for your specific need. And that's an important piece to this, that you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to find new ways to doing things, but also be adaptable to those new ways. and be relentless about learning. This is something that I would tell this now. I wouldn't tell this 1,000 times to someone that's starting their new business. You have to really educate yourself and not just say, I'm just going to find people to do it for me, or just think that it's just going to happen by just gravity. It doesn't happen like that. So that was one piece for me that was extremely important, and I'm still learning, I'm still educating, and I tell you what, there's so much to learn still that is unreal. um, the other thing you mentioned was innovation. So before innovation, what examples do you have on something that you say, hey, for that second piece, innovation, what does that mean to you and as an individual, but also what does that mean for someone in a professional environment?
So that's a very good point out, Eric. And I'm going to spin it back to you because I'm going to use you as an example. That's okay, right?
Of
First of
course.
all, I've got to give you your kudos because you remember before you made that transition to being an entrepreneur on your own. And I told people on my team, I said, listen, we're going to be working with Eric when he finally leaves corporate America and takes his skill set to the next level on the road. I says, but beware when he's involved, everything's going to happen faster. They said, what do you mean? I says, listen, Eric has a relentless approach on growth. And that's the spirit that's needed, in the business environment as well. The first thing I told him you were going to do, because you follow this process, right? You're going to educate yourself. And I know I said, look, he's going to be up to 2 a.m. listening to podcasts. He's going to be joining groups. He's going to be going out to see what he doesn't know. And he doesn't want to learn the hard way. He wants to start off where people are already and quickly close that gap because that's his expertise. And then I said, he's going to innovate after that. Right. And that's the question that you just asked me. So I'm going to use you as an example. Right. So when it comes to innovation, you just finished talking to me about how you're, getting virtual assistants to automate this 4-hour process that you have. Because when you break it down, he says, well, listen, Terry, if I broke my time down into, a cost per hour, I can't afford me to do these things. So I need to take some of these things, I need to automate them. In today's world where we have AI, and I'm still just, blown away by what AI can do. But in this day and age, it doesn't make sense for us to utilize our time doing evaluations of a lot of data, right? We can start off at a higher point. Don't get me wrong. We still need to look at it and understand it. But if you had a process in place that got you to a point that you trust, then, why not start there? We've done several events with clients where we did these business process reviews and they were trying to reduce the lead time it takes to do something. And we got to a point where I had a director in the room and the director would say, well, I've got to approve this. I got to approve this. And I got to approve these things. And that added like 3 or 4 days. So we just asked the question, are there certain things that you always approve? And there are certain things that you always reject? Well, yes. Well, if we define that criteria in a form that did all the calculations behind the scenes, are you okay with never seeing those? Those things that met 100% of this criteria that you would approve, you okay with those being automatically
I,
approved?
I can imagine that their first reaction was, oh no, I have to approve them.
And then there was that reaction until they thought about it and said, wait a minute, but why you said 100%? Yes. But how do you know that? I said, listen, come on. How many times have you tried to go online and apply for a credit card or apply for anything and you leave a field empty and it doesn't let you go to the next screen, or it doesn't let you use a blank, or you typed it the wrong way. It won't let you progress. I says, there's things we can do to put in place those checks and balances using innovation and technology to make sure that this meets the criteria that you want. So I think innovation is key to making the mundane tasks easier to do, because that's the pushback that you get from people. Normally when you get pushback from people is because you're either making a change that's significantly different from what they're used to doing, or you're giving them a task that's tedious that they don't feel is value added. So if I automated those through innovation and technology, then it kind of takes away that excuse, right? Sometimes as leaders, that's your job. Your job is to identify, I won't say excuse, reasons that things don't get done and remove those barriers. Make it easy to do right and hard to do wrong.
Yes, I know you try to clean it up there, but I do agree. A lot of times it's excuses, and this is I know we try to stay politically correct in some environments, but this is you and I here talking. I think it's important to say it how it is. And we do find a lot of excuses for people to not being able to either delegate a decision or being able to establish a criteria so that their people can make a decision. And I think this is an important aspect of innovation that I found. And to your point, I think it's for me, even as you mentioned, this concept of finding tasks that I'm doing on a re- repetitive basis that are not necessarily part of my habits. Let's just say these are just activities that I have to do for my business. That I can find a way to automate, do it faster so I can work on the business more and not in the business, right? And this is a very aspect. I think this is also a key to a lot of professionals out there that are leading teams or um, managing a business, managing a plant. One of the advices that I would give you is if you have today activities that are repetitive in nature, and you could actually establish either a routine for someone or for yourself, but also have a way to automate that so that you can work on the bigger problems at hand in your business. Those that to me will be my advice to you is find ways to get rid of those things that are bogging you down, that are not adding as much value, and really push yourself to work on those higher value activities that are going to continue to drive you towards that vision, towards the progress that we want you to have. So this is really how vision um, gets achieved. This is how you have that vision in motion that we're talking about today. So let's quickly dive into to the number three, because I know we have a couple more things here to cover before we run out of time, but I want to make sure. So you mentioned insulation protection. Can you just give us some examples there, Terry? Because I think this is one that's really important. Obviously, all 4 points are important, but I think this one is key, right, for you to establish that or really solidify that foundation out of the first two that we just discussed.
Absolutely, Eric. And I know we can have a whole podcast just on this insulation portion because this is the meat and potatoes of what we do when we go in to help people. And you think about it when we talk about fostering an environment for growth, a secure environment for growth. Now we're talking about formalizing processes. So I know we do a lot of coaching with people also. And I know one of the stages of our coaching is for the leaders to set up formal one-on-ones, to set up formal processes for gathering voice of the employee, whether that's skip level meetings or whatever that may be, but having a formal process where there's a feedback loop so you can inspect what you expect and align with vision at the exact same time. So you're building that environment. So I'll give you one example. So when we talk about a formal process, so let's say that there's a problem in the facility and they need to escalate it. Well, have you formally documented the escalation protocol? I have several clients that I've helped do that with, where I said, when do you get called at 2 in the morning? Oh, Terry, they better not call me at 2 in the morning. Okay, there's nothing that can happen. They would call you at 2 in the morning. Well, if this happens, well, do they know that? Because you can't be upset that you didn't know about it, because we would have an escalation protocol. I know when I was in automotive, we had escalation protocols down to the minute. After 3 minutes, someone was called. After 5 minutes, someone else was called. After 30 minutes, after an hour, and so forth. But every person, once they were called, had a different role. Like, for instance, when I was in a certain position, let's say a superintendent position, by the time it got to me and it was called, when I got there, I expected to see certain things already. The general foreman would already have the subject matter expert there working on it, and he's got someone else working on a bypass process. So we're looking at a short-term solution and a long-term solution. By the time the next level got there, we're either looking at, do we need to shut the shift down? Do we need to send people home, send them to break, whatever that may be? There's a protocol of escalation. Well, one of the examples for securing this environment and insulating our process so that we can progress is having a defined formal process for escalation, for productivity, for quality, for cost, and for everything else, so that people truly understand what's expected of them and how they're going to escalate it and what their role is in that escalation.
Yeah, and I think this is the point we made in our episode, right? When we start talking about developing a set of guidelines and rules to really help you be effective and have the freedom of decision. And I think that what you explained, right? And I think for an individual, being able to start establishing an call it an operating system. And I know it sounds technical, but it is what it is, right? You have you're tracking your habits, you're tracking your goals, you're tracking your activities, and each of those activities, as you start tracking, you start noticing patterns, right? You start noticing areas where you're maybe getting bogged down too much, and then you start looking at where you can start um, uh, documenting, or let's say uh, finding ways for you to get more efficient, right? And that's where you start being able to, as you explained, right, being able to put together protocols and processes for you to say, okay, now that I'm seeing these patterns, I can now allow myself to automate those that are not necessarily adding much value. I can go into um, better activities that are generating value for me, for my personal goals, and and this is an important aspect of being able to document those areas, document those processes, and then start developing a criteria for you. And I think as a professional, in a professional environment, um, as you mentioned, I believe that there is a way for you to have more clarity amongst your team, more clarity amongst your business, if you have an idea of what to do when this happens, and develop these what if scenarios, right? Where if the place burns down, who gets that first call, to your point? If you have an incident with one of your employees, if you work in a manufacturing environment, somebody gets hurt, right? How is that managed, and who gets informed? The worst that can happen is that something can be prevented from being more dramatic or more critical in nature, by not having good protocols in place for people to know how to react in certain situations. And I know this is a topic for another day, but this is where you start really looking at your environment, whether it's for yourself or for a professional scene, where you need to develop a much broader understanding of what are the risks that you're involved in, and start defining protocols that allow you to really navigate those in a more effective manner, so that everybody understands their roles, everybody understands their lanes, and then you know what to do when those things happen. So now moving on, and I want to cover this one in terms of elevation, right? Elevation, you use the analogy of a building and an elevator versus the stairs. But why don't we give the audience here a practical application of this, something that we can kind of piggyback of what we've already covered on the first three items here, and let's jump right in. So, what do you think will be a practical mechanism for elevation in terms of this concept we're talking about, vision in motion?
It's a very good example for us to talk about with we when we talk about our consultant companies in general, because I've hired consultants myself when I was in corporate America. And when you talk to people about why they bring on consultants, it's all about this elevation. And it's because they not only want to get there faster, but they don't want to go through some of the mistakes. They don't want to go through the learning curve. They want it to be more of a straight path towards their vision that they're going towards. Typically, we get called sometimes when people are in trouble already and they've tried things on their own, and literally they just don't know, okay, well, I can try this, or I can try this, or I can try this. Why don't I get someone that knows what they're doing? Why don't I get someone that's been through this before? And typically when you bring on a consultant, you bring on us. I know when we come in, we always talk about the experience that we have. It's very important the experience is because of all the learning lessons that the battles we went through, the battle scars that we have, that teaches us so that we don't repeat those things. That experience is what people bring on. So when we talk about elevation, this is you not relying on yourself to be the expert, right? This is you bringing in experts as needed. If I want to learn how to lift weights properly, um, if I rely on my own knowledge, now this is a real example of when I went to the gym with my oldest son, and my son, he's into
Yeah, he's on
working on
another
his
level.
body, and yeah, he's more top level. So I'm like, I mean, I can't go with you. I don't want to do that. I'm beyond those days of trying to lift bench press 400 pounds and things. And when he went to the gym with me, he was watching me, and I'm sweating, I'm moving hard, I'm moving a lot of weight. And at the time, I was doing these tricep pull downs. And Eric, you know these. So I literally had like 120 pounds. I'm like, oh man, look, I'm getting strong. I'm doing this. And he came over. He says, Dad, slow down a little bit. He says, let me walk you through the progress or the process that you need to get the most out of this. First of all, you're going too fast. Second of all, you don't need all that weight. He literally cut the weight in half. He went down to 65 pounds. And he says, now put your elbows in. And then I want you to keep him at a 90-degree angle. So he knows I'm an engineer. I talk with numbers. So he's giving me numbers and measurables. So don't go past this 90 degrees. I want you to hold it there for 2 seconds. Then I want to slowly push down this 65 pounds. And I'm like, man, that's not enough weight. I got to 6 and I'm trembling. Like, oh my God, what is this? He says, listen, it's not about how fast you go or how much weight you're lifting. It's about the process that you're going through. Right. And I look at that and I say, you know what? That's what we do as consultants. We look at people and they're checking the box. They're putting boards up. And they say, yeah, we got this nice, pretty board up. And okay, but when I go and I ask an operator or a supervisor, hey, do you use that board? Oh no, they put that board up. I don't know what that's for. Okay, well, what do you think it's for? Well, I have no idea. We put the board up and they told me to write this number, so I write that number on it every day. But they haven't internalized it. I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, take that board down. It doesn't mean anything. If you're not going to use it, we're not going to use this board anymore. So they said, well, no, nope. I'll wait. Get maintenance. We'll take the board down. They take the board down. Then, 2 hours later, I come back. I start asking questions. I ask questions that if they properly understood the data that what they were capturing on that board, they would be able to answer. So when I kept going and I brought other people asked the same question, it was getting different answers, and they started to see as see what you're doing, Terry. Now I understand why we're supposed to do it. It's just like me lifting that weight. Right. I was just trying to push. I was looking at my progress by how much weight I could push down in that tricep press, but I wasn't really working the muscle correctly or following the right form that gives me the most out of it. And that's the point of you elevating yourself by utilizing experts that have been through it. They know what's going to get the results, and they push you to your next level in a more controlled fashion.
Yeah, and by the way, two things there, right? Don't you love it when your kids start teaching you how to
Yeah.
do things properly? It's really one of those where you start realizing you've reached a point now where the student becomes the teacher at times. Not to say that all the time, but it
That's a
is
good thing, though.
it is a good thing. It is and it's happened to me many times. And I love that example with your son teaching you the proper techniques, and I think that's also to me there's a hidden element to what you just said there, and one is that at times we feel that we have an expertise. Maybe we've done this for many years, right? Um, you've been in this environment, maybe in this professional environment for a long time, and you think you have create put yourself in a situation where you've spent enough hours of it that you now are an expert at it. um, However, you fall into the environment you're in, you fall into that trap of now you're not seeing the problem from a high level, you're kind of in it too much. Maybe there's a personal attachment to it, or you have gotten yourself in a situation where you're having difficulty finding the proper solutions. And at times, even though you might have a tremendous expertise in something, it's always good to have someone come in to provide this other viewpoint, right? This other way of doing things. There's an additional element to having that expert come in and say, hey, just like your Sunday with you, right? Adjust here, fine tune this process a little bit here. You may have missed this area, and then all of a sudden things are back on track, and then you could put in place, whatever agenda you had. But I think it's important that we don't fall into that trap where we think we know it all. We think we have all of the answers. And by bringing an expert in an area that maybe you're lacking, and this is where it's important to have that self-awareness too, and not be so caught up into thinking you know it all. That expert is going to give you a boost, right? It's going to elevate you, as you mentioned in the fourth point here, and it's going to elevate you, and it's going to help you get there faster. And by getting there faster, you're going to get your results faster. You're going to achieve your goals faster, or you're simply going to achieve your goals at the time frame that you anticipated, because maybe you were falling behind. So I think this is a very critical aspect of not thinking you know all the answers, you have all the answers. There are other people in your surroundings or out there that can come in and really elevate your situation to achieve your goals. And so we really use this as a concept for many things we do in our lives, and also in our professional environment. Well, Terry, with this, we've reached the end of our segment today, but I really enjoy this. I appreciate all the insights that we've shared. This was a great second episode for someone that really is looking to develop a vision for themselves, for their professional environment, and being able to now start putting it in motion. And as you continue to watch our episodes, in at least in the next few episodes, we have a series that really defines the vision, then how to apply it in a practical way so that you can get that vision in motion, start making progress towards that vision. And the idea behind this is that we provide our audience some practical ways on how to achieve this, and using our own examples, using examples that we've had with our clients. The purpose of this is that you have a succinct way of approaching this, and it's not just something that you hear or read in a book. So with that, any last words, Terry, here before we adjourn?
No, I too am excited about this as we continue to unpack these details to putting our visions in motion. So I appreciate you, Eric. I appreciate the team. I know working behind the scenes, but I look forward to what we have coming up.
Thank you for tuning into Grow the Vision podcast. To continue your journey of growth and excellence, make sure to subscribe and keep up with new episodes. Eric and Terryl are here to help you continue to grow your vision to reality. For additional resources and episodes, subscribe and follow Grow the Vision podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. Stay engaged, stay inspired, and let us help you transform your visionary ideas into reality.